All right, we are starting. Welcome to the Virtual Brown Bag of March 18th, 2021. As usual, we are recording these meetings. We run through this intro so that folks who are watching this later, get a chance to know what these meetings are all about. Those who join us, we ask them to, always share the goodies, but just be aware of what you're sharing because we don't have much time to edit things out later. So don't get yourself in trouble. The Virtual Brown Bag is a place where we get together, we share, tips and tricks, it may be a tool that you started using that you find very valuable, that could be helpful to others, maybe a shortcut that you use a lot and you see that not everybody knows about it, articles you've run into or books that you think are intriguing, share those with others, experiences, the things you've learned the hard way or frustrations, difficulties, you had a hard time addressing something, or maybe you haven't been able to figure it out yet. Throw it out here. Maybe somebody else has gone through the same thing and can point you in the right direction. And not supposed to be a one-way conversation. Logistics, we do this every Thursday from 12 to 1 Central Time here on Skype. Feel free to share the link with coworkers, friends, people who might also benefit from these conversations or contribute to it. What have we shared before? We've been all over the place. We are usually mostly developers here joining in, but we come from different backgrounds, front-end, back-end, full stack, .NET, Java, Ruby, what have you. Everything is fair game. It's always a good experience to share across different domains and areas of expertise. So if you have anything to share, please do. We have the virtualbrownbag.com website where you can always find the link to this meeting here on Skype, as well as information about previous meetings, along with the links to the YouTube videos that you can watch later and kind of see what we've talked about on each one of those meetings and, catch up with whatever it is that we've been sharing. Other than that, let's get things rolling. I see that Mike also joined in. Welcome, Mike. And yeah, so what have you guys been up to? Anything exciting? Anything troublesome?
Hey guys, how's it going?
All right. So I've got one thing I could share, but let's see if anyone else wants to show stuff off. Mine shouldn't take too terribly long.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Yeah, I guess I've been diving into like front end. I'm currently doing a TypeScript React Native mobile app on the front end, and been getting George, I've been doing like a bunch of back end stuff over my last few projects, but it's been a good experience like diving back to the front end and getting it back into the world. So that's what I've been doing lately, a bunch of front end stuff, which has been pretty cool.
That's nice. It's funny that the last 2 days I've interacted with some fellow co-workers who have just started like working on React-based projects with TypeScript, and then they're both like facing some sort of issues here and there, just coming from a long time just using plain JavaScript and then having to deal with some of the things, the quirknesses or just the specifics of TypeScript, like knowing the types of everything.
Yeah. It's like JavaScript's strict parent is like always over your back watching everything, which is kind of cool, but
right.
Yeah. What have you been struggling with the most on there?
So in this code base, you had to get used to the concept of generics that we kind of got into a little bit, but haven't used it a lot. And just making sure that like coming from JavaScript, that making sure your types are correct, just all the things that TypeScript, like small errors that I'm not used to seeing, that I gotta go back and find, and just getting used to like all the extra fluff that comes with TypeScript, pretty much.
Yeah. Have you run into the advice yet of like don't use any whenever you're tempted to use the any type, usually the unknown type is what you actually want?
Unknown? I I don't know about the unknown type, but I know that any isn't like the best thing to use, but I haven't heard of unknown.
So yeah, that's an important thing because sometimes you do get yourself in like a straitjacket and you're like, I don't know what the type here is, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's a really key thing. So the thing is, any won't get type checked at all, right?
Right.
It'll let you through, but there's not going to be any type checking. Unknown lets you use the variable so long as it's only being used in other unknown ways. But if you want to call methods on it, properties, anything like that, you have to actually tell it what type it is.
Right.
And that's usually what you want, because in most situations where you would be using any, it's not because you're not actually referencing properties on there, because when you get to the point where you're referencing properties or calling methods, you usually do know what type it is,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah. Right.
So yeah, unknown 90% of the time when you're tempted to use any unknown is the right thing to do.
Yeah. Okay. That's good advice.
Yeah, thanks, George. I did not know that. So as you're describing, I just did a quick search to see what else came up. And one guy said, anyone coming from a C# background, any is like dynamic and unknown is like object.
Okay.
Does that?
I think that's a fine analogy. I think that there's so yeah. I guess a similar thing from a C# background always be to use an right, which is the same in TypeScript. However, in C#, like if you use object instead of an open generic, that like comes with performance penalties.
Yes.
Whereas in TypeScript it doesn't, because it's just an annotation.
Right.
So it's a lot more okay in TypeScript than it is in there. But an open generic would still always be preferable anyway. But it's not that big a deal, basically. Okay. Just an open generic allows you to do stuff. And what we mean by open generic, by the way, Michael, is when you have a generic parameter into there, right?
Okay. Yeah.
It's open because you can decide what fills that generic parameter. Yeah. And I know that like the open closed generic parameters terms are more commonly used in .NET. Other languages like either don't have terms for it, which is very frustrating, or they like will use stuff like reify or things like that, which is just confusing and academic sounding. But yeah. Any particular things with TypeScript you've been struggling with, stuff like that? I see Cheyenne's on here. I know he's been like trying to get into TypeScript as well. So
it's just fun, like just diving in.
Talk more about.
Yeah, it's just been fun just like diving in and get my feet wet. The most issues I've been having is with this Gradle build. That's my most issues becoming, like fixing build errors. The TypeScript stuff is pretty self, like it tells you, like it directs you in a way, where it's kind of pretty convenient where stuff is or issues are. But the build, because I had to like install Android Studio on my Linux, and that's been giving me more issues is just the build. But I mean, it's been fun. It's been interesting learning a lot of stuff.
So great. So this is like a native project or something like that?
Yeah.
Okay. React Native. Okay. Yeah, that's a whole other thing.
Yeah.
That's gonna be that's a problem.
Yeah.
Cool.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if any of us have anyone on the call has any expertise with that, but I don't know if you have specific questions even. But
there's been a bunch of sources on that, on like Stack Overflow and like GitHub issues, but so there's been like a bunch of resources where I found even that's been pretty helpful. Like it tells you where the error is coming from, and like ways to go about solving it. So.
All right. Anyone else have anything they want to bring up? Anything they want to show off, talk about? Or Mike, do you have more stuff you want to?
Yeah, actually, if you don't mind, I have something to discuss about.
Sure.
Okay, well, recently I'm trying to search around to find somehow a pattern or any approach to organizing my React project. So, of course, React is so flexible, and most of us know how to organize it. But the only things I could find around is atomic design pattern. Beside of that, I couldn't find any design pattern so that it helped me to organize my project. Mostly, currently, I'm working with the NextJS, but the problem is that when you're trying to build a big platform, it contains, I don't know, greetings, forms, different UI elements, dashboard, and these kind of stuff. You come to build or design many different components, from a small to big one, and these leads you to a really ugly component structure. At least this is what I come to. So beside of the atomic design pattern, which other pattern exists out there, or which other pattern people here commonly use?
Okay. Okay. I mean, do people have thoughts on like front end React application structures? Now you said you are using Next. Doesn't Next have like a ton of opinions on where you put stuff, and like routes are tied to files and things like that?
Well, as you know, Next.js is somehow a route directory base. So for building your routes, you build different directories and you can handle that. But this is only for building the pages and routes. There isn't any specific idea behind adding components to it.
Okay. So I can kind of give a couple answers to that from me. One of the things, so first of all, one of the things that I do a lot is I say, like, certainly at the beginning of a project, I don't even bother using directories. I generally say, like, all right, just flat directory, just dump everything into the same directory until it becomes a problem, and then you'll have a better view on what the problems are and what the organizational structures should be, and then just spend half a day moving stuff around, which can be tough when there's other people involved. But I mean, it's also something you could really only do earlier on. But the idea is that you want to develop opinions on what would help you before starting to just doing it, right? And that gives you an opportunity to do it. The other thing that I've done a lot, I've done it in two places. I did it on the project that Michael and I worked together, and I did it on another project via a Yarn link, is to pretty aggressively into like mock node modules. Anything that realistically is going to be used in more than two places and is not super specific to this project. So let's say I organize stuff around the concept of a page, right? Stuff that really is only going to be used in that page. So there's going to be a folder there. Stuff that really is only specific to render it to this particular page is going to go in that folder. I also have no problem with putting multiple components in the same file, really. But then once I start, if stuff is reusable, so there's kind of two categories, right? If stuff is reusable, stuff that it needs to be reused between multiple other components, there's stuff that's super specific to this project, like for example, a component with like a context which sets up all the API routes that I'm going to use, right? Things like that. That's super specific to this project. That I'm not super thrilled with this, but what the best I've been able to do for that is to drop that at like the highest level directory, because it's central and you shouldn't end up with too many of those. And I'm open to a better suggestion. But then for anything that could presumably be useful to multiple components and is not tied to like this very, very specific use case, I've been making custom NPM modules for it, but I don't push them up to NPM because that's a pain in the ass, because anytime you want to be able to change code and see your changes right away. So there's two ways to do that. So one of which, and kind of what I did last time, and I preferred this. So well, okay, I'll talk about two approaches, right? So the first approach is you take advantage of the fact that when you do like import foo, right? Unless there's a path component to it, it's not a dot slash or something, it's going to look in node modules, right? When it looks in node modules, it just starts looking up the directory level until it finds the most recent the node modules that's above it, and then looks in there for something that has that name. And if not, actually even keeps going up until it finds the next node modules and looks for that name. So what I actually do what you can do is create a folder just in your project structure called, I don't know, like packages or something like that, or and node fake packages, and you put your code in there, and then in your node modules you set a symlink into that directory. So it's looking up to those node modules, it hits that symlink, you name it after your project. Right, I'm working on Project George, so I name that George or George packages, right? And I have that linked to this folder, and now it looks in that folder for stuff like that. So if I make a component, a user selector component, right? I'm gonna have either inside of this folder, I'm gonna have either a user selector file or a user selector folder. So now when I do import George packages / user selector, it's going to search up into node modules, find George packages, link into there, and then find it in there. And so that to me brings some really nice organization. Now the symlinks committing symlinks is kind of weird, but I know Yarn has a mechanism for handling that with Yarn link, and I know NPM added a linking mechanism too, which I think works as well. And to do that, you have to read up on how to do it, but it's basically a way that the package manager will manage the link for you. And that makes it, I don't remember if it commits it or it's just a step you have to do after you clone the project, but it's literally like just a command line thing you run and you can document it, and that sets it up. So that's the most straightforward thing I've been able to find. And I guess now that I said that, it might be good to like actually demo it, but does that make sense, at least what I'm talking about? Or
Yeah, exactly. So okay, I have my voice. Okay, the thing that I'm currently do, I divided all the component. I mean, I have a condition for making a component or not. If I found a piece of code that I'm going to reuse it in two places, I said that, okay, I need to make this as a component. But the thing that I have, there are different type of components. We build some component that dedicatedly, particularly dedicated to a specific page. For example, you have a sign up page. In sign up page and sign in page, you both have inputs and bottom, but the form would be different. So if I supposed to build a form, a component form for sign up and sign in, I create a directory name, direct project, a direct component or a specific component, and under that I create two directory, sign in and sign up, and try to gather all the component that related specifically to these two pages. But for the rest of the things, for example, inputs, bottoms, I have a shared directory and put all the component that I could use them any places there. This is my current approach, but after that I found atomic design. So I was curious if there is any specific design, or no, we can do whatever suit our project.
So I've heard of atomic design, but I don't know what it is. So I would like you to describe it. But actually, before I do that, it's just because you said the shared directory thing. The reason I don't like to do that, just saying that, and why I preferred basically that same idea but making NPM modules for it, is because with a shared directory, you have to path to it using relative paths. And that means that once you start moving files around, you're going to break all the path structures. And that becomes difficult, right? So that's why I prefer the node modules thing, because it does the same type of thing, but without having to rely on relative paths. It gives you a namespace.
For node module that you mentioned, I believe your specific means this, because previously, if I'm not wrong, we already talked about that. I have a project and it grows, and it has a browser extension, it has a web, and it has a React Native, and I use some modules with all of these within all of these applications. For that, I found monorepo that really suits my situation, and it easily handle my stuff. After that, I found that, okay, with monorepo, even I can share my reusable component in every places. So beside of just trying to handle it in one specific directory under my project, I can create a different package in my monorepo, and what you exactly mentioned, like node modules, and use them like that. But beside of the, otherwise the opposite, the node modules, as it's a monorepo, you do not need to publish it or link it through the npm. It easily handle all the stuff for you.
So when you're saying monorepo, are you talking about some specific piece of software, or are you talking, because monorepo by itself just means you have multiple projects in the same repository, which doesn't get rid of it. So it sounds like you're talking about like maybe Lerna or something like that.
Yeah, Lerna. I use with Lerna.
Yeah, and I think Lerna under the hood basically does the same type of thing as linking does, as Yarn Link does, and now I think NPM Link. So I'm not actually sure that there's a ton of reason for Lerna anymore. I'm sure it does stuff, but I think most of what I could be wrong. I'm going to stop talking about it. I could be wrong. I thought that Link kind of superseded a lot of what it did, but I might be wrong about that. Yeah. So yeah, what is atomic design? Because I've heard of it, but I haven't.
So yeah, let me explain it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the idea of atomic design comes from somehow the biology, just like the human bodies. All of a human body shaped from an organism, and then each organism shaped from some. Oh, I know the exact name. For example, like pieces, like head, hands, foot, body, and the rest of the thing. And these pieces gathered, built from different things, like organism, and each organism built from molecules, and each molecule built from atoms. So atomic design said that if you're about to build our project, we can divide it in a way that we can name each pieces we can categorize each pieces as what we have in a biology body or things like that. So it shaped it said that we are supposed to shape our project in 5 pieces. The smallest piece is named atom. For the atom, it's the thing that you cannot divide it in pieces, in any smaller component. For example, it could be text, it could be bottom, or things like that. After that, when you define your atoms, if you're supposed to gather your atoms, then it creates you the molecule. So a good example of molecule could be, for example, an input. In the input, we have a label, we have form input and these kind of stuff. Or it could be, for example, a card, for example, in Bootstrap design, in Bootstrap framework, you have a card, it's a title, and it has the, yeah, exactly. It has the things. And again, if you gather your molecule, you make the organism, and this, you can manage your project structure.
Okay. So,
Yeah, exactly.
huh.
Do you prefer that over other patterns that you used in the past? The atomic design?
Actually, well, George each time told me that every approach were required to set for your specific problem. So it's totally different from one situation to another situation. But considering working with a really huge project, I think atomic design would not suit that. But if you're supposed to
Okay.
work on some mid or a small level project, I think it's a good way to at least start, create a vision in your project and shape your directories and components.
Okay. Okay. Cool.
Because the previous work I had with Binary Group, we have a project named Drive App, app.drive.com. This is the project. And when we use that, I mean, when you're working with this project, it's a really huge platform. It's combination of 3 different projects, and all these projects using reusable components, estates, and many other things. So to build those stuff, we definitely couldn't handle the project using this atomic design pattern. And finally, we come up with solution to make, use the monorepo to handle the stuff. We were using Lerna for that. If you look at on the top, on the top left, it has a drop down that has the name D Trader. Yeah, if you open that, you see there are 3 other platforms there: Dbot, DMT5, and a Smart Trader, and all of them are the things that loaded within this platform. But still, after working on that project, I found that still working with Lerna, I mean, the big problem is that as your project grows, you have no other choices unless to see ugly and really complex code, because you face you face a situation that you cannot organize your codes and your component in a really sufficient way, and definitely you face somewhere that it's really ugly, really complex, and you need to sit and put some time to understand that.
Right. Okay.
Mm.
Do you have a link for any resources for the you said it was Lernic?
Lerna. They've got like a Hydra or something as a logo.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. So here's the thing about atomic design. Like, okay, I heard what you were saying. I skimmed through the article just now. I get the concept. It's cool. I like it. It doesn't really solve the direct issue you were talking about, right? Because the direct issue you're talking about, like, all right, how do I organize files and folders? So then I was like, all right, let's look file and folder design with atomic design. And what I'm seeing is people just keep saying, all right, we'll have a folder named molecules, a folder named atoms, a folder named components, and that a folder named organisms, and that breaks the entire concept that Brad Frost pitched in atomic design. Because if you're relating it to biology in the body, it's not all the molecules are over here, all the organisms are over here, and all the atoms are over here. That's not how it's organized, right? It's all jumbled together, and it's a hierarchical thing through but like hierarchical in scope. And so what it seems to me is files and folders don't work well with this concept, at least organizing around those things. Now, they might be useful to have like molecule and file name, or if you've got like an advanced IDE sort of environment, maybe within each component or within each file, you tag it somehow that this is an organism, this is a molecule, and then you could search when you navigate. You navigate to by molecules, by organisms within this particular area or something like that. That I'm totally dig that that's useful. I don't see the point of having organism, molecule, atom directories, because you're just gonna end up with things that should be highly coupled live in completely different directory structures, but they are highly coupled, and then they are difficult to navigate between as well. I don't know, that part I'm dubious about.
Yep, exactly. You're 100% correct about that. That's why I mentioned that it's only work for, in my opinion, it's only work for a small project, just like building pieces of 2 or 3 pages that it does not have too many complex component or elements on it.
Yeah. Yeah, but I mean, like,
Hello?
Oh, did we lose George?
Yeah,
George, we lost you for
we
5 seconds.
what?
Yeah.
What?
We lost you for like 5 seconds.
Oh, I said I like the idea. It just doesn't seem to relate to files and folders that much. Like it seems like it would be sticking a round peg in a square hole to, or the opposite, right? Round goes into square, fine. A square peg into a round hole to try to make it work with folders.
Right, right. How much in everybody's experience do you, like, when a project gets to a point where it needs to like modify its architecture, do you pull from different patterns, and like is there ever a case where you like I guess use different design patterns or architectures to like go to the next step in the application if it gets too big or it becomes, too much of a problem with the current state, if that makes sense?
I think that drawing from different patterns, that's almost required. I remember like back in 10 years ago when people started talking about like model view model pattern, which addressed one case, and then as applications grew more complex, you would end up with model view models and also controllers. So even though it was not like an MVC pattern, we did need to bring in controllers to orchestrate certain interactions and things. So I think it's important to be aware of the patterns that are out there, what kind of problems they address, right, their intent, and then apply them as, different situations may need, and not be like, okay, we are doing everything following this one pattern, now we have a new problem, and we're trying to, just shoehorn that problem into the same thing just because that's how we're doing everywhere else. It's like, no, it's a new problem.
Right.
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 Whatever.
I think
For that.
I sense something in the way you asked that question that maybe it'd be a good idea to kind of clarify what is generally meant by design patterns and architecture. So design pattern typically means like at the level of a couple classes working together or a couple functions working together. And the way I always talk to people about it is it's just a standard. It's a design pattern is not even usually a very concrete thing. Like the same exact code can be different design patterns. It's a way of talking about how you use it, right? Or I have a couple functions or a couple classes, and I'm making them interact in a certain way. And here's a standard term for that. So then when I talk to other developers, I can say, this is doing a decorator pattern. I don't have to pull out the whiteboard and like start being like, no, this is how it works, right? That's it's just a word thing that makes it easier for communication. So you should use design patterns because that's a common. You should study design. You are using design patterns already. You should study design patterns so that you could use those terms so that you can communicate with other developers easier. Is kind of how I think about it.
Okay.
When we talk about architecture, now architecture is a vastly larger thing that is certainly not just how you structure files and folders, but that goes anywhere from, well, how do you name things in your project? What are the standards of the project? To how do you keep the code base healthy as it grows? To how do you identify the terms, the words which the code should speak? Like, are we using the term user or are we using the term customer? Well, what does the business use? What the general patterns are for moving data around, and then going up into like systems design. Okay, we're pushing into the cloud. What part is a queue? What part is a index, and what part is stuff like that? But like, it's all those things together. And actually, one of my big pet peeves is that lately people have been thinking systems design is architecture, which it's not. It's just like kind of one small part of it. And like all the cloud stuff is very important. There's a lot to learn, but it's far from all there is to architecture as well. So the answer there is, yeah, you should do architecture up front because you should have some opinions on how you're going to build stuff, but you do need to be flexible and look at other patterns and pick the right architecture for your project, right? And it's hard to be an architect. And so Ted Neward, who Claudia and I both know, you've met Ted, right? I'm sure you've been at his house, right?
Yes, a couple of times.
He used to have all those parties.
Yep.
Yeah. So Ted Neward's awesome. Ted Neward looks exactly like Jeff Bridges in Big Lebowski. Yeah. Look up pictures of Ted Neward. You'll see.
I am laughing.
Yeah. Yeah, he came up with a workshop called go to image search. It's right there. Yeah. Tell me he's not the dude.
He is the guy.
So he came up with this workshop, which he called Architecture Katas. I think 10, 15 years ago. And really, I actually don't like the use of the word kata there. It's not the right use, but the basic idea is here's a need, here's an exercise, and think through how you would architect it. And there's he put some structure around like how people go around architecting it and then getting feedback and so on. But for the most part, like that's what the recommendation is. It's practice just seeing these problems, coming up with these problems, and thinking through how you would architect it, which is a useful thing, right? Like, so think about a college, right? You need to build a college system. You need within the system you need to have students who can register for classes, have instructors who maybe propose classes and administration approves them, and then they're available for registration. But then there's also scheduling things, and also students can't register for classes unless their bills are paid. So think through stuff like that, write it down, and then think of how you would design that system. And then if you want to do it
George.
I think we lost George again.
and then next actually writing down the design and thinking through it and seeing all the edge cases, and next day you come back and do it again, and each day you try to do something pretty different, and then you start taking the best pieces, and then you keep doing it and doing it and doing it, as your mind becomes clearer on what a good design is. And then you keep doing it over and over again just to refine the process of picking the best parts and combining them, and getting that muscle memory down of like, oh, at this point, this type of diagram is useful. Oh, at this point, this type of diagram is useful. So like that would be like the full kata concept for this exercise.
Cool. I'm going to have to try that out, because that is like a pretty good distinction between the two. That I think I got conflicted, but that's a good point. And seeing like the difference, obviously, like, the more I see it, the more I do it, the better, I'll be able to identify it. But just going in with that distinction from the start makes it a bit more clearer between the two.
Cool. Rounding us back to the folder structure, just something that came to mind, because I've gone through that recently in many other projects. Share it here. Like, say, in a typical MVC organization of things, where very typically, folks who organize things under, like, there is a model folder, and then underneath it, there's like sales folder, and then all of the models for sales. Purchasing folder, all the models for folder. And same thing for views and controllers. So thinking from like the artifacts that we've used to implement, as opposed to actually flipping that around and organizing it by like the bounded context or the domain areas. Sales, everything about sales. Purchasing, everything about purchasing. And this is a kind of refactoring I've seen done, and I've done myself in many projects where, because usually when we come from the business, we don't think, oh, there's a problem in the controller. There's a problem in sales. There's a problem in purchasing. Let me find that part in the project and then find how it got implemented.
Right? My thought on that is that doesn't go far enough, and that you shouldn't have model view controller folders at all at that point, because they're not. So ideally, the sales thing shouldn't have that much stuff in it. And if it has that much stuff in it, it should be broken down more. And if it doesn't have that much stuff in it, then there's no point in having MVC folders, because just totally use a file convention, or just have there be 3 files, right? Or 4 files, 5 files. So yeah, but this is a good start. Yeah. But the problem with this is that, like, okay, you have sales right there, and as the sales screen keeps growing and growing and growing, you realize that there's actually 2 different types of sales. Like, right, there's the sale, there's the review, there's the my orders review page, and then there's the sale, the CSM pages. Well, okay, now in order, like, so maybe under sales there should be both of those. But then now that's gonna interact poorly with this MVC folder thing, right?
Yes, totally agreed. So I mean, if I got that right, it's like just keep like refining. So like maybe under sales we have, well, the catalog of stuff that we sell. Maybe we have inventory that we use to pull like sales stuff, or of course those could be even their own folders and domains and everything, but not just stop there, right? Organize as per the business needs. And totally on board.
And I think in my experience, a lot of the times once you do that, you start you do that, and then back and get rid of those top folders, because you're like, there's not really such a thing as sales. It's really just a bunch of stuff that's grouped together by functionality, but that's not really reflected in the code at all. So we're just going to move catalog and inventory up to the top level.
Yes.
And that's one of the reasons, by the way, I don't like the shared directory thing, is because because then you feel like you don't want to do that, because then you have to go and fix up relative paths in all the files.
Yeah.
Yep.
Absolutely. Yeah, because it's the thing that our knowledge grows as time goes by, right? So right now it seems like everything should go in the top level, then we start refining, and then we identify certain things that should go back to the top level as its own thing. Yep. And make it so that we can make those changes, right? Because sometimes we get so committed to certain frameworks that make you do things their way, and it messes up you organizing it as per your business. which is Gotcha. Cool. All right, good stuff. George, I think you had something there and you wanted to share.
Yeah. Talk about it. So I did a deep dive into something I just couldn't, I didn't understand, and I couldn't find any really good documentation on. And I'm curious how many other people understand it, because in my experiences, it's only people with beards longer than I've been alive that know this. Who can tell me when the heck bash or C runs versus bash profile versus dot profile versus /etc/rc file, when the different startup files run?
Oh, dude, yeah, I get completely confused on those every
I
time.
have no clue. No clue.
Okay. Because it is super confusing, and part of it is, and a lot of this is like historical and like seriously, like two people I had to go that I've had to explain it to me that seem to actually understand it, were both like have been coding since before I was born. So here's go ahead.
Does the order matter?
It is automatic, but when does it
No.
run? It doesn't just run whenever you run bash.
No, I said, does the order matter?
Does the order matter?
Yeah.
There actually is not an order.
Oh,
so
okay.
Unless you specifically
Oh, George.
First of all, just to set the scene, we're talking about specifically about S drive shell, so bash, ZSA. Fish does not work this way, I believe. E shell, PowerShell work differently as well. But bash and ZSH, which means that that's the default thing on Mac and stuff like that, and Linux and most systems.
Right.
So every single shell has option, can run as a login shell, first of all. Now, what is a login shell? For the most part, it doesn't mean a ton. It's like a marker on the shell. The premise is that the login shell is the one that's supposed to be launched directly by the bootstrapping process, right? So that's kind of the top level of your kind of process tree, like you actually logged into a system. That's the basic idea. It doesn't quite work out that way. You could also make something a login shell by doing -- login when launching either bash or ZSH. Okay. Checking if you are in a login shell, there's ways to do that, but there's not great ways to do it reliably, because like one of the things you can do is, I believe, check the $- variable, and there's some stuff in there that will be in there depending if you're on a login shell, but it doesn't work in all situations, so it's confusing. So if you are a login shell, then it's going, when it starts up, it's going to run your profile. So it'll start, if it's bash, it's going to run, it's going to do a search, and it's going to run the first of these files that it finds, the first of these files that it finds and can read. So it's like bash profile, then like /etc/bash profile, and then finally, or something like that, and then dot profile in your root, and then something like etc.profile. It varies a little bit by version, and obviously ZSH is ZSH profile, not profile. But when you're putting no problem. So none of that runs RC, by the way. Also, if you're on a Mac, whenever you open up a terminal, it is launched with a login shell, even though you already are logged in. Also, if you are on a Mac, and you launch stuff from the dock that is not a terminal, like, for example, Emacs or another application, and those applications have terminals inside of them, the dock doesn't have a login shell in its parent process, so those will not launch a login shell unless that application explicitly does that. So a little bit confusing. Basically, if you're running a terminal, your profile will have run either when you logged into the system and you therefore inherited all those environment variables,
Hey,
or
George, to share your screen, man.
Share my screen.
Yeah, we're not seeing it.
Oh, I'm not sharing my screen. I don't have
Okay, good.
anything on my screen. Yeah. But yeah. So the thing to remember is that you have to know whether it's a login shell for profile, right? And also notice if you're in a shell and you start another shell inside of it, or another process, it inherits all the environment variables from the parent process. Right? So somewhere in the parent chain of the process, so some process launched my process, some process launched that process, there is a login shell, unless you're on a Mac and running a program from dock that does not do that explicitly. That's stupid confusing. Then on top of that, there's another thing called interactive mode. If the shell is launched in interactive mode and is not a login shell, if it's interactive and login, then the login takes precedence. But if it's, even though that's not documented, but that's what I found in my experiments. If the shell is running in interactive mode, which is with the -I flag, which does not stand for interactive, actually, so you can't do --interactive. It's -I because what that controls is a sh opt thing, right? But it's specifically, you launch a shell with -I, that launches it in interactive mode, and in that case, it will look for the RC file, and again, it looks at, I think, bash RC, or there's like a sequence of files. It looks like usually it'll be your bash RC file or ZSH RC, and I'll run that. That will happen only when you run a shell with the -I flag. So anything where, but it's not quite so simple, because you can also say --no RC, which tells it launch an interactive shell with no profile, which there's no point, but it does happen with no RC file. You could also do --RC file and provide a different RC file for it to run. But then --RC file doesn't do anything if you're not in an interactive shell. I have a little write-up. Let me post it in chat. Actually, I you know what? Okay, I can share my screen with this at least. Because I put it in a gist there. I can share my screen to that, so at least we're looking at something. Because it gets a little more complex than that, but that's the basics of it. And there is a RC file login bash RC file flow chart. There is this chart that's from this one article, which is mostly correct, but not entirely. The key things to remember, and the part that most people don't know, is that there's this concept of interactive or login, right? And that's going to determine it.
Pretty cool. I had no idea about any of that stuff.
Yeah, it's like I said, most people don't.
Yeah, I did.
I was like talking to a coworker, and he was like, "Yeah, I remember, like, we kind of covered it in class, and like, but no one really talked about it explicitly." I was like, "Yeah, I bet your teachers didn't know." Like, it's like really important. But then the place where this gets really confusing, remember, is environment variables are dynamically scoped. They're not lexically scoped. They're not scoped to just your environment. So when you start a process, they're copied in from the parent process. So it kind of depends not only on how you started your process, but how it depends how you started that process, but whatever you used to start that process, how that started that process, and how that started that process, and so on. They're constantly they're copied in with each additional process, with each additional thing. Also, like where this gets a little more, it gets a little more complex. If you run bash by itself, just bash on the command line, I believe that will start in interactive mode. If you do bash-c, it's not interactive mode because the assumption is you just want bash to run stuff. So if you do bash-c and pass it in the commands that you run, it's not going to run your RC file in that session unless you also pass -i. So it gets confusing. I'll put this link in. I should probably put that link in here. Don't do that. This chart is useful.
For Ted Neward, you said it was called architectural katas. That
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. The other things, I'm pretty sure that these sequences vary by version, or and stuff like that. Because I know I've definitely I've been talking to people and they'll say like, oh no, I have like one in an etc that runs, or like in documentation I'll find ones like that. Another interesting thing that I found from like reading all the docs on this, which are not as clear cut as people claim, is that when you have a login shell, there are files you can run on logout too. It's like bash logout or something like that. Not as useful, but if you need to like free up resources because you're SSHing into somewhere, that could presumably be useful. Though again, I'm not super sure where. I'm also pretty sure that this gets even more complex if you consider tools like Tmux or Screen, which probably host a login shell themselves. All right. So that was
I have a last quick question.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no.
It's kind of random, but what chairs do you guys use? Like, I've been finding myself at the computer a lot lately, and I want to, save my back for the long haul. So like, do you guys have like any specific chairs or like things you use for like, sitting down for a long period of time?
I never cared about chairs, so I'm the wrong person to ask that.
So for
Yeah,
specific
actually,
about that. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, man.
Go on, please.
Yeah, I was gonna say I'm very specific about that. If I sit on a regular chair, I get like some bad blood circulation, so my legs start feeling like hurting, and my back. I've always had bad posture, so the regular chairs don't work quite well for me because regular chairs, you normally nobody really leans back on the chair. We are always leaning forward as we are staring at the computer. So those don't work for me. So I've been mostly working on standing desks most of the day. Keeps me moving. That's why I'm always moving, and I have like a mat, like a standing mat thing that I step on. That's very like smooth and soft, and it keeps just putting pressure on my feet. It just helps with blood circulation. But other thing, and when I do sit down, I use I think they call kneeling chairs, which is one of those weird-looking chairs.
I remember we worked together. Claudio had this, and I think when I came into the office, you weren't there. I was like, "What is this? Does this guy have a swing at his desk? What the heck is this?"
And
I
mean, George, you believe it if I tell you, but I still have that same chair.
Yeah.
It is right here. Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
It's still that same chair, and I have another one in the office that I bought. So wherever I have to do some work, I always keep a chair like that. So the main point of that chair is that it encourages you to keep a straight back, and of your legs, it helps with blood circulation. So like when I didn't have a standing desk, I could sit on that chair for say 8 hours and it wouldn't bother
gotta
me.
drop quick on the meeting, but thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, George. Appreciate it,
All right,
man.
George. Thank you.
Yeah, so this, I
Okay.
remember first time I saw a chair like that, there was a guy that had a very severe back problem, and then he rolled one of those into the office. I'm like, what the heck is that? And then I tried it for like 2 minutes, like, oh, I don't like it. That's stupid. What doesn't make sense to me. And then years later, a friend of mine was giving this one away because he said, oh, I don't use it anymore. You want to try it? I said, what the heck? Let me try it. And I made an effort to stick with it for a week. That was like 12 years ago or so. Never gone back to
Okay.
regular chairs, at least not for working, right?
Okay. I'm about to try one of those.
Yeah,
I see
try
a
one.
bunch of on Amazon.
Yeah, they
look
have
into
like
that.
this, like they have the fancier ones, and they have the one that I have is actually cheaper. It's like this one. Yeah, this is the other one that I have at the office, so it's a little bit cheaper. You know, you have some adjustment for your height.
Okay.
The funny thing is that every company I'm working at, I bring that chair, and everybody's like, "Oh, that's a weird chair. How can you work on that?" And then I stand up and I say, "Okay, try it." They sit down, and like, "Huh, it actually feels pretty good. Can I try it one more time?" Like, yeah, have at it. And they end up adopting it because it's weird on the beginning. It's different, but once you get used to it, how it feels, so you want to try that out.
Cool. Yeah, because I've been doing a bunch of like stretching and yoga, and I've been feeling like a bunch of kinks and stuff, but like I shouldn't be feeling them. So I know it's like my posture and like if I'm sitting down all day, bad. So just trying to find different ways of improving that.
Yeah, give that a shot. Another thing that I've been trying that another friend of mine recommended is like a yoga ball. So once in a while, I just pull my yoga ball and I sit on it as I'm doing work. Because the thing of like keeping you balanced, you have to like work on keeping balanced sitting on the ball while
Right,
you're
right.
doing the thing. It just works your lower body. It's another thing to try out. I actually enjoy every once in a while. I just roll my ball, from my bedroom to the home office and just sit on it for like an hour or so. Feels kind of nice.
Cool.
Excellent. All right. Yeah, I do need to wrap things up and get ready for the afternoon meetings. But thanks a lot, guys. That was a lot of great discussions going on here.
Yeah. Thank you guys.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much,
Enjoy the rest of the
guys.
day. All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye bye.